The stars above the outer rim of the Galactic Empire were quiet. For centuries, the Empire believed they controlled every corner of known space. They believed no one could challenge their fleets, their armies, their rule. But in the far reaches, where no Imperial patrol had been for years, something began to move. It started as a faint signal, a whisper on an old, forgotten frequency. The Imperial listening stations almost ignored it. The voice was faint, almost broken, but the words were clear enough to send a shiver through the officer on duty. This is only the beginning. The officer checked the source. It came from beyond the mapped borders, past the empty void that even smugglers avoided. He reported it to his commander, who simply laughed. The Empire had heard such strange signals before. They called them ghosts. Of the void, random noises, broken transmissions from old wars. But this one was different. It was deliberate. Days later, the first Imperial patrol vanished. The fleet's last recorded log showed no enemies on the scanner, no warning signs, no battle reports. One moment, they were cruising in formation. The next, they were gone. No distress call, no debris found, only silence. The Emperor's advisors argued about the cause. Some said it was a natural phenomenon, a black hole swallowing the ships. Others suggested rebels hiding in the deep. None of them considered that this was the first contact with something far more dangerous. A week later, another incident. An Imperial trade convoy reported being shadowed by unknown ships. The shapes were strange, long, sharp, almost like black blades against the stars. They made no sound, no engine flare, no heat signature. When the convoy hailed them, there was no answer. The ships simply watched, then disappeared into the darkness without firing a single shot. In the Imperial capital, the council grew uneasy. Reports kept coming in, strange movements in deep space, unexplained sensor readings, missing scout ships. The Emperor finally ordered a small fleet to investigate. They sent 30 warships, enough to crush any pirate force. The fleet moved out from the nearest Imperial stronghold and entered the Black Zone. For days, they saw nothing. Then, without warning, the lead ship's lights went out. Captain Duron of the Imperial cruiser Iron Wing stared at the empty darkness. On his main display, no enemy appeared. His crew scrambled to scan the area. That was when the first shot came, not a bright laser blast, but a beam of invisible energy that sliced through the lead destroyer like paper. No one had time to scream. The enemy ships emerged slowly, almost lazily, from the dark. They were smaller than the Empire's battleships, but they moved like predators, fast, precise, each one gliding without a sound. They fired in short bursts, each shot hitting perfectly, disabling Imperial engines and weapons before the crews could react. Panic spread through the fleet. Imperial ships tried to retreat, but the enemy always appeared ahead of them, cutting them off, striking without mercy. The Iron Wing managed to escape by dropping into a lower orbit of a nearby gas giant, hiding in its magnetic storms. Captain Darren watched from the shadows as the enemy ships vanished back into the black. When the survivors returned to Imperial space, they carried strange recordings. The enemy's communication was encrypted, but one line kept repeating in their data. Logs. The translation made little sense. "We are not here to fight. Not yet." The Emperor listened to the report in silence. He ordered the fleet rebuilt and doubled the patrols along the borders. But privately, he asked his intelligence chiefs a single question. If this was not them fighting, what will it look like when they truly do? The chiefs had no answer. Weeks, passed, but the strange sightings continued. In mining colonies, workers reported seeing shadows drifting across the stars, larger than any Imperial vessel. Merchant crews whispered about ghost ships following them through hyperspace lanes. The stories grew darker with each telling. One deep space freighter claimed they saw one of the unknown ships dock with an abandoned station. Hours later, the station exploded in complete silence, as if something had erased it from existence. Still, the Empire did not know the name of their new enemy. They did not know their origin, their numbers, or their purpose. The Council believed they could be bargained with, like any other faction. The military believed they could be defeated, like any other threat. Only one man, Admiral Vorin, an old warrior who had fought in the early expansion wars, saw the truth. He had seen this pattern before, the way predators studied their prey. Before striking, "They are testing us," Vorin told the Emperor. "They are learning how we fight, how we think, and they are not using their full strength." The Emperor frowned. Then what is their full strength? Vorin's eyes were cold. Pray we never find out. But the truth was already moving. Through the darkness, humanity, long hidden beyond the Empire's reach, had sent only a fraction of its forces into Imperial space. What the Empire faced now was not an invasion, but a probe, a warning, and in the black void beyond the stars. The real army waited. The silent arrival had begun. The Emperor's orders spread through the Imperial military like fire in dry grass. Border fleets were reinforced. Patrol routes were doubled. Scout ships were launched into the empty black in every direction. The Empire wanted answers, and it wanted them fast. The task fell to Admiral Corthus, a man known for his strict discipline and zero tolerance for weakness. He was given a strike, fleet of 50 warships, battle cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and escorts. His orders were simple: find the intruders and destroy them. Corthus had fought many battles. He believed no enemy could withstand the firepower of the Empire. But in the dark edges of space, confidence could turn to fear in a heartbeat. For 2 weeks, the fleet searched. They passed empty star systems, silent asteroid belts, and cold, dead worlds. The crews began to relax, thinking the enemy had vanished. Then the signal came. Unidentified ships, 32 light minutes ahead. No engine signature, no transponder. Corthus leaned forward in his command chair. "Bring us to attack formation. All ships, weapons, live. We will crush them in one blow." The Imperial fleet closed in, but the strange readings confused the scanners. The enemy ships were small, barely half the size of an Imperial destroyer. There were only 12 of them. Corthus almost laughed. This would not be a battle. This would be an execution. But the first move did not come from the Empire. It came from the dark. Without warning, the enemy ships moved. They accelerated faster than any Imperial vessel could track. One moment they were drifting. The next they were on top of the lead cruisers. The first Imperial ship was hit by a weapon unlike anything Corthus had ever seen. There was no flash, no bright beam, just a sudden tearing of metal, as if the ship had been cut open by invisible claws. Atmosphere and fire burst out into space, and the cruiser was gone. Corthus ordered a full volley. Hundreds of plasma bolts and missile salvos filled the void. But the enemy moved like shadows, weaving between the fire, vanishing and reappearing in impossible patterns. They did not fight like pirates. They did not fight like any known navy. Each of their attacks was precise, targeted at engines, sensors, and weapons. Imperial ships were left drifting, helpless, but not destroyed. It was as if the enemy wanted them alive to watch. On the carrier, Resolute Commander Hale tried to lock a missile strike on one of the strange ships. The computer locked for a second, then the target was gone. He stared at the display, his hands cold. The enemy had moved out of range before the missile even launched. The battle lasted less than 15 minutes. 12 enemy ships against 50 Imperial warships. By the end, only 30 Imperials could still move, and none of them had landed. A killing blow on the intruders. And then, as quickly as they had come, the enemy disappeared. No pursuit was possible. The damaged Imperial ships limped back toward friendly space. The crews were silent. Even Corthus had no words. Hours later, the fleet received a single transmission on all channels. It was a voice, calm, confident. Human, this was only a drill. The words burned in every Imperial officer's mind. A drill that meant the enemy had not even been serious. In the Imperial capital, the news spread quickly through the upper ranks. The council demanded answers. How could a small, unknown force humiliate one of the Empire's strongest fleets? Corthus could only tell them the truth. They were facing an opponent unlike any they had met before. But the real danger was not the loss of ships. It was the effect on the Empire's pride. The Galactic Empire was used to winning. Now, whispers filled the streets of the capital. Some said the enemy were ghosts. Others believed they were ancient warriors from a forgotten age. The name Phantoms began to spread through the lower ranks. Far away, on a hidden command vessel deep in uncharted space. The truth was much simpler. These were humans. Captain Elias Marr stood at the center of his bridge, watching the playback of the battle. His fleet was not the real human navy, not even close. His ships were outdated, his crews made up of volunteers and young recruits. This was not meant to win a war. It was meant to test the enemy. Reports from all ships, Marr said. Minimal damage. No casualties. Imperial forces lacked coordination. Targeting systems primitive. Weak against speed attacks, his second-in-command replied. Marr smiled slightly. Good. We have learned. Enough for now. Pull back to the rally point. The real fleet will decide what happens next. Back in Imperial space, Admiral Corthus sat alone in his quarters. The last thing he saw before his damaged cruiser left the battlefield was one of the strange ships passing slowly by his viewport. It did not fire, it did not threaten him, but he could feel the message in that silent moment: we could have destroyed you, and that was what shook him the most. The first clash was over, but the war had not yet begun. The Imperial fleet's defeat spread through the galaxy faster than any official report. News always found its way past censors. The crews who survived whispered to friends, who told others, until the whole Empire began to hear the same story. An enemy that appeared out of nowhere, struck with perfect accuracy, and then vanished without a trace. In the great cities of the core worlds, people spoke of ghost ships drifting through the dark. On the mining colonies, workers claimed to see shadows crossing the stars, too big and too fast to be asteroids. Merchant captains swore that something followed them through hyperspace, matching their jumps, always staying just out of sight. The Imperial Council tried to keep order. Official bulletins called the intruders a small pirate force and promised swift action. But the people were not fooled. The stories had too many details to be lies. Some even said the enemy walked among them, hidden in plain sight. On the desert world of Teralis, an Imperial listening post picked up a strange transmission. It was short, only 5 words, spoken in a calm voice. "We are still watching you." No one could trace its origin. The station commander reported it to Imperial intelligence, but the message was never released to the public. The higher ranks were beginning to understand the truth. Fear was spreading faster than any fleet could travel. In the Imperial capital, the Emperor called a meeting of his highest commanders. Among them was Admiral Voron, the old warrior who had warned him before. "They are not trying to win battles," Voron said. "They are trying to get inside our heads, and they are succeeding." Some commanders dismissed his words, claiming the Empire's size and strength would crush any intruder. But others stayed silent, remembering the reports of the first clash. Meanwhile, far from the capital, the humans moved quietly through Imperial space. They never attacked civilian worlds. They never destroyed ships without reason. Instead, they cut trade routes, disabled defense satellites, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. Every move made the Empire feel smaller, more vulnerable. On the agricultural moon of Varys, an Imperial garrison woke to find their landing field empty. Every dropship and shuttle was gone. The guards swore they had seen nothing during the night. Hours later, the missing craft were found drifting in deep space, untouched, engines still cold. On the space station, Calvus 9, security cameras caught a figure moving through restricted areas. The figure was tall, armored in dark plates, the face hidden by a smooth helmet. When guards tried to stop it, the figure simply stepped into a maintenance tunnel and was gone. The station's sensors never picked up a ship leaving. These were not random acts. They were calculated moves, designed to make the Empire doubt its own strength. The people began to ask questions the Council could not answer. If this was the enemy's full power, why had they not already struck the capital? If it was not, then what were they waiting for? Back in the shadows of uncharted space, Captain Elias Marr studied the results of these operations. His crews had mapped Imperial fleet positions, tested response times, and gathered information on every major defense system. "We have seen enough," Marr told his officers. "The Empire is strong, but it believes it is untouchable. That belief is breaking." One of his younger lieutenants leaned forward. "Do we strike now, Captain?" Marr shook his head. "No, not yet. We are not the real army. Our job is to prepare the way." He looked out at the dark void beyond his flagship's viewport. Somewhere out there, beyond even his reach, the true human fleet waited. Ships larger, faster, and more powerful than anything the Empire could imagine. Weapons capable of turning whole worlds into ash. And they were patient. In the capital. The Emperor could feel the unease in the air. He had ruled for decades, through wars and rebellions, but this was different. This was not an open enemy to crush. This was a shadow that slipped through his fingers. "Double the patrols," he ordered. "Seal the borders and find them." The order went out, but in his heart, the Emperor knew it would not be enough. One night, alone in his private chamber, he looked out at the stars beyond the palace. Somewhere out there, the enemy was watching him, and though he had never seen their faces, he could feel their gaze cold, measuring, waiting. That was when the Emperor asked himself a question he could not ignore. If this was not their real army, then what would happen when it arrived? He, Emperor, had grown tired of shadows. For months, the intruders had slipped through his fleets, humiliated his commanders, and made the Empire's citizens question the strength of their rulers. This could not continue. He gave one clear order to Imperial intelligence: capture one of them alive. The task fell to the Black Talon Division, the Empire's most secretive hunters. They did not move in fleets. They struck quietly, with stealth ships and assassin teams. The Talons waited, watching, following fragments of reports until they found their target. A small human scout ship operating deep in Imperial territory. The ship was fast, but not fast enough. The Talons disabled its engines with a precise ion strike, boarding before any distress call could be sent. Inside, they found only 3 crew members. They fought with a skill that shocked even the Talons, but they were overwhelmed and taken alive. The prisoners were brought to the capital, hidden from the public. They were placed in a secure chamber deep under the imperial palace. Only the emperor, his closest advisors, and a few intelligence chiefs were allowed to attend the interrogation. The leader of the captured crew was tall, with dark eyes that did not blink often. His face was calm, as if he were not in the hands of his enemies. The emperor studied him for a long time before speaking. "You command the ships that have been attacking my fleets," the emperor said. The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "No, we are not the ones who attack." The emperor frowned. "You lie. We have seen your ships destroy ours." The man shook his head slowly. "Those were not attacks. Those were tests." One of the generals slammed a fist onto the table. "You cripple our ships, kill our soldiers, and call it a test." The human's gaze did not change. "Yes, we needed to see how you respond, how you fight, how you think, and for what purpose," the emperor asked. The answer was quiet, but it froze the room. "To decide if you are worth the effort of our real army." The emperor felt the blood drained from his face. "Your real army." The man leaned forward slightly. "You have not seen it. What you faced so far is nothing but a shadow, a fraction. We were sent to measure you, not destroy you." The generals laughed nervously, thinking it a bluff. But the human's voice carried no trace of humor. One of the intelligence chiefs activated a projector on the table. "During the capture of the ship, we retrieved data from its computers," he said. The air above the table filled with holographic images. Massive fleets appeared, ships larger than anything the Empire possessed, bristling with weapons. No Imperial scientist could identify. There were carriers the size of cities, armored vessels with hulls that looked like black stone, and long, thin warships that seemed built for speed beyond anything in the known galaxy. The room went silent. "How many?" the emperor asked. The intelligence chief hesitated. "We do not have exact numbers, but the files suggest thousands." The emperor turned back to the prisoner. "If this is true, why not send them now? Why waste time with these games?" The man's eyes were cold. "Because when we send them, there will be no second chance. We are giving you a moment to think, a moment to decide. Decide what? Whether to stand in our way or step aside." The room erupted in shouts, threats, and accusations. But the emperor sat very still, staring at the man in front of him. When the meeting ended, the prisoner was taken away. The emperor walked alone through the palace corridors, the images of that vast human fleet burning in his mind. He could feel the weight of what he had seen. The Empire, for all its power, might not survive such a force. That night, he called a private meeting with Admiral Voran. He told him everything. Voran listened in silence, his face grim. When the emperor finished, the old warrior spoke. "If what this man says is true, then every battle we have fought so far has been meaningless. We have been chasing shadows, while the real enemy waits in the dark. The Emperor nodded. We must prepare. Every world, every fleet. This will be the greatest war the galaxy has ever seen. But deep down, they both knew it might also be the last dot, far beyond Imperial borders. Captain Elias Marr received the news that his scout team had been captured. He did not panic. He knew the data on their ship was meant to be found. Let them see, Marr said to his officers. Let them imagine what is coming. Fear is a weapon, and it is already working. The humans began moving quietly, calling their true fleet from hidden stations across the stars. Slow and patient, like a storm building far over the horizon. Unseen until it was too late. The Empire had finally realized the truth, but it was already too late to stop what was coming. Asterisk, the first warning came from a lonely border station on the far edge of Imperial space. A deep space sensor, long considered useless, suddenly lit up with signals. Dozens of contacts, then hundreds, then so many that the display began to flicker under the weight of the data. The station commander at first thought it was a system error. No fleet that size could exist, not outside the Empire, not anywhere. But as the readings stabilized, the truth became impossible to deny. Something massive was entering the border, and it was coming fast. The commander sent an emergency message to Imperial Command, his voice shaking. Before he could finish his report, the long-range cameras caught sight of them, dark shapes emerging from the void, each one larger than an Imperial battleship. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls glowing faintly with strange blue energy. The feed went silent. In the Imperial capital, alarms rang through every military channel. Fleet after fleet was scrambled to the border. Admirals barked orders. Worlds began evacuation drills. For the first time in centuries, the Empire was afraid of what might come through its gates. At the edge of that border, the storm broke. Humanity's true army had arrived. They came in layers, the front line of heavy warships, their armored hulls like black stone, behind them carriers the size of cities, and further still, sleek spear-shaped vessels built for speed and precision strikes. Thousands of smaller escort craft swarmed between them, like a living shield. Their weapons were not visible in the way the Empire understood. No glowing barrels, no open missile bays, but each ship pulsed with restrained power, energy fields bending faint light around them. It was as if the fleet carried the weight of a star inside each hull. Admiral Voran stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship and watched the first scans come in. The scale was beyond anything he had seen, even in his long career. His officers looked to him for orders, but for once, the old warrior had no words. The Imperial fleet moved into formation, ready to defend the border. Thousands of guns charged, missile bays opened. The Emperor's voice came through every channel. Hold the line. Show them the Empire does not bow. Across the void, aboard the human flagship, Eidolon, Captain Elias Marr received the final signal from High Command. It was time. All ships, Marr said calmly, maintain position. Weapons cold. His second-in-command frowned. We are not firing. Marr shook his head. Not yet. They must understand before we strike. And so the human fleet advanced. Slowly, without firing a shot. The sight alone was enough to make the Imperial line waver. Ships the size of floating fortresses drifted forward, their black hulls swallowing the starlight. The closer they came, the more the scale became clear. Some of the human carriers were larger than Imperial orbital cities. When they stopped, the lead ship of the human fleet sent a single transmission to the Imperial flagship. It was a voice, deep, calm, and utterly certain. We gave you time. We gave you warning. This is your last chance. Stand aside or be erased. On the Imperial bridge, silence followed. Officers looked to Voron, to the Emperor's hologram, to each other. No one spoke. The Emperor finally replied. His voice was strong, but the edge of fear could be heard beneath it. If you cross this border, we will fight. Ma listened, then closed the channel. He gave a single order. Advance. The human fleet moved forward again. The Imperial guns opened fire. A wall of plasma and missiles screamed across the void. But before a single shot could hit, the human fleet's shields flared with a strange blue light. The entire volley simply vanished. Energy readings showed it had been absorbed, not deflected. A moment later, the humans fired once. It was not a beam, not a missile. It was a single pulse of energy that rippled through the void like a shockwave. Every Imperial ship it touched lost power instantly. Engines died, weapons went dark, lights faded. The mighty Imperial line became a silent graveyard of drifting. Still, no ships were destroyed. No lives were taken, not yet. Humanity had sent a message more powerful than any weapon. On the Eidolon, Ma watched the Imperial fleet go dark. Send them home, he ordered. The human ships moved between the powerless Imperial vessels, towing them gently back toward their own space. Not one human vessel took damage. Not one Imperial weapon fired again. Back in the capital, the Emperor received the report. The battle, if it could even be called that, had lasted less than 7 minutes. Voron stood beside him. They could have ended us, the old admiral said quietly. They chose not to. For now, the Emperor looked out at the stars. He understood what this meant. The Empire had been spared, not because it was strong, but because humanity had decided to let it live. And somewhere in the dark, far beyond the borders, Ma's voice echoed in a secure channel to his own high command. The storm has arrived, and this was only the first wave.